Have you ever stopped to think about what goes through an animal's mind when it loses everything it knows? Imagine the scene: a practically deserted street, the heavy silence of the late afternoon, and there, in the middle of the asphalt, a body lying there. Next to it, two small puppies, trembling, whimpering softly, not understanding what happened. The scene is heartbreaking. You look and already feel that tightness in your chest, that anguish that seems to take over everything. What would you do if you passed by there at that moment? Many people would look away. Others would stop but wouldn't know how to react. And then there are those who simply pretend they saw nothing. But the truth is that this situation, however painful it may seem, is more common than we imagine. Every day, somewhere in Brazil, scenes like this are repeated: abandoned, injured, frightened animals with nowhere to go. And the worst part? Often these stories end in tragedy. But it doesn't always have to be that way. Have you ever been through this? Have you ever seen an animal in a risky situation and didn't know what to do? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you and even save a life. When we come across a scene like this, our hearts race. We want to help, but at the same time, insecurity creeps in. Is it dangerous? Will the animal react badly? What if I don't know how to take care of it properly? These are legitimate doubts, but they can't paralyze us, because while we hesitate, an animal is suffering, and often all you need is a simple gesture, someone with the courage to approach, to extend a hand, to not turn their back. The two puppies in that scene didn't know it, but their lives were about to change. They didn't understand what had happened. They didn't know if anyone would come. They only felt fear, colds, and loneliness. And that's exactly where the difference lies between a story that ends well and one that becomes just another sad statistic. The difference is in you. It's in me. It's in whoever decides not to ignore it, who will do something, even if it's small. Throughout this video, you'll understand how a simple action can transform everything. You'll see how small gestures of empathy can be the difference between life and death for a defenseless animal. And most importantly, you'll learn what to do when faced with such a situation, because believe me, one day you might be someone's only hope. And I'm not just talking about dogs. I'm talking about any living being that needs help, compassion, and humanity. So take a deep breath, because this story will move you. It will make you reflect on the role each of us plays in the lives of the animals that cross our path. And who knows, in the end, you might leave here with a new perspective on what it truly means to care for, love, and protect. Because what comes next isn't just a story about two lost puppies on an empty street. It's about all the times we have the chance to do things differently. And you know what moves me most about all this? It's knowing that there are people on the other side of the screen who feel the same way I do. People who can't remain indifferent to a scene like this. People who believe that every animal deserves a second chance.
And that's exactly why I invite you to join this wave of empathy right now. If this topic resonates with you, if you've experienced something similar, or if this story is touching your heart, leave a comment below about what resonated with you the most. Tell us, have you ever rescued an animal? Have you ever faced a situation like this and didn't know what to do? Or perhaps you have a beautiful rescue story to share. I read all the comments, and each story below strengthens this network of people who truly care. And look, if you've enjoyed the content so far, click that thumbs up. It may seem like a small gesture, but it's what shows YouTube that this type of message needs to reach more people. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. People who, like you, have an open heart to make a difference in the lives of animals. Every like, every comment, every share is a vote of confidence in this mission. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button now, because here we don't just talk about exciting cases. We bring information, real stories, practical tips, and lots of love for animals. Become part of this family. Activate the notification bell and don't miss any new videos. Together, we make much more noise, spread much more awareness, and most importantly, save many more lives. Now, returning to that silent street, to the two lost puppies and the body lying on the ground, because what happened on that street wasn't just a sad scene. It was a true revelation about something that many people still underestimate: the emotional intelligence of animals. Those two puppies weren't just crying randomly. It wasn't just any crying, It was something different. They barked at passing cars, ran towards approaching pedestrians, and then ran back to the body on the ground. It was as if they were saying, "Please, look here, we need help." And that's no exaggeration. Anyone who has lived closely with animals knows that they have an impressive ability to communicate needs, fears, and even intentions. This type of behavior reveals a much more complex mentality than we imagine. Dogs are not just instinctive creatures reacting to their environment. They make decisions, assess situations, and seek solutions. At that moment, the journey of those two little ones was clear: to find someone who could help. And even without speaking our language, without being able to shout or ask for help with words, they were doing exactly that. Each bark was a cry. Each run towards a person was an attempt to establish a connection. Each turnaround was a reminder that time was passing and the situation was urgent. This type of behavioral transformation doesn't happen by chance. When an animal senses that something is wrong, that there's danger or suffering involved, it activates a survival mode that goes way beyond where we usually attribute to them. And the impact of this on how we see animals is enormous. Because if we accept that they have this capacity, if we recognize that there's a hidden truth behind those looks and those sounds, we also need to accept that ignoring such a cry for help is ignoring a conscious being who feels, who suffers, who hopes. The behind-the-scenes story, which I'll tell you in more detail later, shows that not everything was as it seemed in that initial scene. But what matters now is understanding that those two little ones were doing everything in their power to change their destiny. And that in itself should be enough for us to stop, pay attention, and act. How many times do we go through situations like this and simply don't notice the signs? How many times do we think an animal is just making noise, when in fact it's asking for help in the only way it knows?
This is one of the greatest revelations I've carried with me since I started working with rescue. Animals talk. It's just that we don't know how to listen. And when we learn to pay attention, when we understand that every gesture has a meaning, that every reaction has a reason, everything changes. The way we relate to them changes, the way we react to a risky situation changes, and above all, our responsibility as human beings becomes much clearer. So think about it. If you saw two puppies doing exactly that, barking, running, coming back, insisting, would you stop, or would you think it was just another stray dog making noise? Because that decision, however simple it may seem, can be the difference between saving a life or letting it be lost. Comment below, "I would stop to help," if you would actually do that. I want to know how many people here have that mindset of action, of not turning their backs when the cry for help is so evident. And it was precisely at that moment that something began to bother those observing the scene closely. Because look, if you stop to analyze it calmly, something doesn't add up in this story. If that body on the ground was truly lifeless, why were the puppies acting so insistently? Why didn't they simply run away scared, as would be natural in a situation of danger or trauma? Why, instead of moving away, did they stay there, coming back, barking, attracting the attention of everyone who passed by? This is one of those hidden truths that only those who stop to truly observe can perceive. And when you do perceive it, everything changes. The journey of those two puppies was far from being just an instinctive reaction of despair. There was something deeper happening there, a kind of strategy, an unspoken but extremely effective plan. They weren't just reacting to a loss, they were trying to reverse a situation. And that's a revelation about the level of consciousness these animals have. Because think about it, if it were just fear, they would have hidden. If it were just sadness, they would have remained quiet, huddled up, apathetic. But no, they were active, determined, almost desperate for an answer. And that generated a strange feeling in those who witnessed it, a mixture of curiosity, confusion, and urgency. This type of behavior forces us to rethink many things we take for granted. The common mindset is that animals react purely on instinct, without complex reasoning.
But when you see a scene like this, when you notice the persistence, the repetition, the strategy behind the actions, you start to question, aren't we underestimating these beings too much? Isn't our decision to ignore, to walk past, to think it's just another dog on the street based on a completely misguided view of what they're really capable of doing and feeling? The impact of this reflection is transformative, because from the moment you accept that there is intelligence, that there is intention, that there is real communication happening there, you can no longer be indifferent. You begin to see each bark as a word, each look as a plea, each movement as an attempt of connection. And when you understand this, the responsibility to act becomes even greater, because you are no longer facing a simple animal. You are facing a being that is trying to tell you something. And ignoring this is ultimately ignoring a truth that you already know exists.
The behind-the-scenes story will reveal that feeling of strangeness had a very clear reason. But before we get there, it's important that you understand the weight of this moment of doubt, because it is precisely in doubt that the opportunity for change lies. When we stop and question ourselves, when we don't accept the first impression as absolute truth, when we allow ourselves to feel that something is wrong, that's when transformation happens. That's when we get out of autopilot and truly see what's in front of us. And look, this doesn't just happen with animals. This logic applies to so many areas of life. How many times do we go through situations where something doesn't seem right, but we ignore it because it's easier, because it's less work, because we prefer to believe it's not our problem? And then, later on, we discover that we could have done things differently, that there were signs, that there were clues, that the truth was there, begging to be seen, but we chose not to look. That day, the puppies were screaming the truth, and some people walked right past. Others stopped, watched, but didn't have the courage to act, until someone finally decided to investigate, and what that person discovered changed everything. Comment below, I would have investigated, if you would have really had the courage to get close and find out what was really happening. And then came that second that changes everything, that moment when your heart races and the world seems to stop for an instant. Because when someone finally had the courage to approach, to really look closely, not just glance over the scene and move on, something impossible happened. A tiny detail, almost imperceptible, that most people would never have noticed. The adult's chest was moving. It was a subtle, weak movement, but it was there. He was breathing. That body on the ground wasn't lifeless, it was alive, and everything, absolutely everything, gained a new meaning in that instant. The revelation was like a punch to the gut, because until that moment, everyone who had been there had assumed the worst. The scene seemed definitive, irreversible, but the puppies knew. They always knew. That's why they didn't run away. That's why they didn't give up. That's why they kept barking, running, insisting, calling attention. They weren't mourning the loss of someone. They were fighting for someone's life. And this transformation in the way we see the story is brutal, because suddenly those two little ones weren't just victims of a tragedy. They were heroes, strategists, saviors. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the impact of this discovery goes far beyond the obvious. Think about it. How many people passed by there before? How many looked, felt pity, but didn't stop? How many did exactly what society teaches us to do? Move on, not get involved, let someone solve it. And while that was happening, a life hung by a thread, and two little ones were doing the impossible so that someone, anyone, would realize the hidden truth in that scene. And then came that second that changes everything. That moment when your heart races and the world seems to stop for an instant. Because when someone finally had the courage to approach, to really look closely, not just glance over the scene and move on, something impossible happened. A tiny detail, almost imperceptible, that most people would never have noticed. The adult's chest was moving. It was a subtle, weak movement, but it was there. He was breathing. That body on the ground wasn't lifeless, it was alive. And everything, absolutely everything, gained a new meaning in that instant. The revelation was like a punch to the gut, because until that moment, everyone who had been there had assumed the worst. The scene seemed definitive, irreversible. But the puppies knew. They always knew. That's why they didn't run away. That's why they didn't give up.
That's why they kept barking, running, insisting, calling attention. They weren't mourning the loss of someone, they were fighting for someone's life. And this transformation in the way we see the story is brutal, because suddenly those two little ones weren't just victims of a tragedy, they were heroes, strategists, saviors. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because the impact of this discovery goes far beyond the obvious. Think about it. How many people passed by there before? How many looked, felt pity, but didn't stop? How many did exactly what society teaches us to do? Move on, not get involved, let someone solve it. And while that was happening, a life hung by a thread, and two little ones were doing the impossible so that someone, anyone, would realize the hidden truth in that scene. This kind of journey forces us to rethink our own decisions, because we live in a mindset where it's easier to believe that there's nothing we can do, that it's not our responsibility, that someone more prepared will appear. But the truth is that many times someone more prepared simply doesn't exist, or takes too long to arrive. And in the meantime, lives are lost, opportunities to make a difference disappear, and we're left with that weight on our chest, that feeling that we could have done more but chose the more comfortable path. The behind-the-scenes story reveals that time was of the essence, every minute counted, and if no one had stopped, if no one had been curious enough to investigate, if no one had paid attention to the behavior of those puppies, that adult would have died right there, alone, in the middle of the street, and the two little ones would have been orphaned, lost, without direction. But fortunately, there was someone who decided to see beyond the obvious, someone who didn't accept the first impression as absolute truth, someone who had enough empathy to act. And you know what's most impressive about all this? The ability of animals to perceive things that we simply can't. They feel breathing, warmth, heartbeats. They know when there is life, even when everything seems to indicate the opposite. And this should teach us something fundamental, to trust them more, to believe more in what they're trying to communicate, because often they know more than we imagine. And when we learn to read these signs, when we develop this sensitivity, the world opens up in a completely new way. This revelation isn't just about this specific story. It's about all the times we have the chance to do things differently, to choose to see what's hidden, to not accept the surface as the whole truth, to have the courage to investigate, to get closer, to act even when everything seems lost. Because sometimes the difference between life and death lies in a detail, in a second of attention, in a decision to stop and really look.
The behind-the-scenes story will reveal that that feeling of strangeness had a very clear reason. But before we get there, it's important that you understand the weight of this moment of doubt, because it is precisely in doubt that the opportunity for change lies. When we stop and question ourselves, when we don't accept the first impression as absolute truth, when we allow ourselves to feel that something is wrong, that's when transformation happens. That's when we get out of autopilot and truly see what's in front of us. And look, this doesn't just happen with animals. This logic applies to so many areas of life. How many times do we go through situations where something doesn't seem right, but we ignore it because it's easier, because it's less work, because we prefer to believe it's not our problem? And then, later on, we discover that we could have done things differently, that there were signs, that there were clues, that the truth was there, begging to be seen, but we chose not to look. That day, the puppies were screaming the truth, and some people walked right past. Others stopped, watched, but didn't have the courage to act, until someone finally decided to investigate, and what that person discovered changed everything. Comment below, "I would have investigated," if you would have really had the courage to get close and find out what was really happening. And then came that second that changes everything, that moment when your heart races and the world seems to stop for an instant. Because when someone finally had the courage to approach, to really look closely, not just glance over the scene and move on, something impossible happened. A tiny detail, almost imperceptible, that most people would never have noticed. The adult's chest was moving. It was a subtle, weak movement, but it was there. He was breathing. That body on the ground wasn't lifeless, it was alive, and everything, absolutely everything, gained a new meaning in that instant.
The revelation was like a punch to the gut, because until that moment, everyone who had been there had assumed the worst. The scene seemed definitive, irreversible, but the puppies knew. They always knew. That's why they didn't run away. That's why they didn't give up. That's why they kept barking, running, insisting, calling attention. They weren't mourning the loss of someone. They were fighting for someone's life. And this transformation in the way we see the story is brutal, because suddenly those two little ones weren't just victims of a tragedy. They were heroes, strategists, saviors. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the impact of this discovery goes far beyond the obvious. Think about it. How many people passed by there before? How many looked, felt pity, but didn't stop? How many did exactly what society teaches us to do? Move on, not get involved, let someone solve it. And while that was happening, a life hung by a thread, and two little ones were doing the impossible so that someone, anyone, would realize the hidden truth in that scene. And then came that second that changes everything. That moment when your heart races and the world seems to stop for an instant. Because when someone finally had the courage to approach, to really look closely, not just glance over the scene and move on, something impossible happened. A tiny detail, almost imperceptible, that most people would never have noticed. The adult's chest was moving. It was a subtle, weak movement, but it was there. He was breathing. That body on the ground wasn't lifeless, it was alive. And everything, absolutely everything, gained a new meaning in that instant. The revelation was like a punch to the gut, because until that moment, everyone who had been there had assumed the worst. The scene seemed definitive, irreversible. But the puppies knew. They always knew. That's why they didn't run away. That's why they didn't give up. That's why they kept barking, running, insisting, calling attention. They weren't mourning the loss of someone. They were fighting for someone's life. And this transformation in the way we see this story is brutal. Because suddenly, those two little ones weren't just victims of a tragedy. They were heroes, strategists, saviors. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the impact of this discovery goes far beyond the obvious. Think about it. How many people passed by there before? How many looked, felt pity, but didn't stop? How many did exactly what society teaches us to do? Move on, not get involved, let someone solve it. And while that was happening, a life hung by a thread, and two little ones were doing the impossible so that someone, anyone, would realize the hidden truth in that scene. This kind of journey forces us to rethink our own decisions, because we live in a mindset where it's easier to believe that there's nothing we can do, that it's not our responsibility, that someone more prepared will appear. But the truth is that many times, someone more prepared simply doesn't exist, or takes too long to arrive. And in the meantime, lives are lost, opportunities to make a difference disappear, and we're left with that weight on our chest, that feeling that we could have done more, but chose the more comfortable path. The behind-the-scenes story reveals that time was of the essence. Every minute counted, and if no one had stopped, if no one had been curious enough to investigate, if no one had paid attention to the behavior of those puppies, that adult would have died right there, alone, in the middle of the street, and the two little ones would have been orphaned, lost, without direction. But fortunately, there was someone who decided to see beyond the obvious, someone who didn't accept the first impression as absolute truth, someone who had enough empathy to act. And you know what's most impressive about all this? The ability of animals to perceive things that we simply can't. They feel breathing, warmth, heartbeats. They know when there is life, even when everything seems to indicate the opposite. And this should teach us something fundamental: to trust them more, to believe more in what they're trying to communicate, because often they know more than we imagine. And when we learn to read these signs, when we develop this sensitivity, the world opens up in a completely new way. This revelation isn't just about this specific story. It's about all the times we have the chance to do things differently, to choose to see what's hidden, to not accept the surface as the whole truth, to have the courage to investigate, to get closer, to act even when everything seems lost. Because sometimes the difference between life and death lies in a detail, in a second of attention, in a decision to stop and really look.
And it was at that exact moment that everything turned into a real race against time. Because discovering there was life there didn't mean it would last much longer. The breathing was weak, irregular, almost imperceptible, and the puppies, even after someone finally stopped to help, remained restless, agitated, as if they felt that every second was precious. They didn't relax, they didn't calm down. They continued barking, circling, looking around as if they were saying, "Quick, do something, we don't have time." And their urgency was real, because deep down they knew what many people were still trying to process. That was their last chance. The mindset of those present completely changed. What had previously seemed like a scene of impending tragedy now became a desperate rescue mission. Calling for help, trying to wake the adult, checking vital signs, securing the scene, calming the puppies, all at the same time. And in the midst of this organized chaos, the two little ones were the only ones who seemed to have complete clarity about what needed to happen. They didn't get in the way, they didn't stand in the way, but they also didn't leave their side. It was as if they were supervising every movement, every decision, ensuring that no one gave up, that no one thought it was too late. This type of situation reveals something profound about the nature of urgency and how different beings react to it. Humans often panic, freeze, and don't know where to begin. But animals, especially those who've experienced trauma or dangerous situations, develop a kind of survival instinct that keeps them focused on the goal. They don't waste time with existential doubts. They act, they persist, they don't give up. And at that moment, the puppies were teaching a valuable lesson to everyone there. Giving up was not an option. The journey until help arrived seemed endless. Each passing minute increased the tension. The adult was still unconscious, its breathing growing weaker, and the puppies, with that inexplicable intuition only they possess, seemed to know exactly how critical the situation was. It wasn't just fear, it was awareness. It was the understanding that this was a matter of life or death, and the impact of this realization on those witnessing everything was overwhelming. Because suddenly, you're not just helping a dog in the street, you're participating in something much bigger, something that will mark you forever. The behind-the-scenes story of this race against time shows that small decisions made all the difference. The choice not to ignore it, the choice to approach, the choice to call for help, the choice to stay there, waiting, even without knowing if there would be enough time. Each of these decisions was a link in a chain that could break at any moment. But it didn't, because there were people willing to not give up. And there were two puppies who simply refused to accept any outcome other than the survival of that adult. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this sense of urgency, that every second counts, is something we should apply to other areas of life as well. How many times do we postpone an important decision? How many times do we think we have all the time in the world to do what needs to be done? How many times do we put off that phone call, that conversation, that gesture of affection? And then, when the time runs out, when the opportunity passes, we regret it. We realize we should have acted when there was still a chance. That day, the puppies didn't let anyone procrastinate. They created a sense of urgency. They forced action. They refused to accept passivity. And thanks to this almost irritating but absolutely necessary insistence, that adult's life still had a chance to continue. The ambulance was on the way, the time was running out, and everyone there prayed that it wouldn't be too late. Comment below, every second matters.
And here's the part that still moves me to this day when I think about this story. Because if you stop to coldly analyze what happened, the truth is crystal clear. Without those two puppies, that adult would have died there. Simple as that. It's not an exaggeration, it's not dramatization, it's a fact. Because think about it, how many people had already passed by that street? How many looked from afar, assumed the worst, and moved on? How many simply didn't want to get involved? The answer is many. But the puppies didn't accept that indifference. They provoked human intervention. They forced someone to stop. They created a situation impossible to ignore. This is one of the greatest revelations about the role animals can play in our lives. We often think that we are the ones who save them, that we are the heroes of the story when we rescue an animal from the street. But the hidden truth is that many times they are the ones who save us. They are the ones who teach us about empathy, about persistence, about not giving up when everything seems lost.
And in this specific case, they were the ones who literally saved a human life. It wasn't the doctors, it wasn't the ambulance, it wasn't any trained professional. It was two small, scared puppies, but determined to do what needed to be done. The impact of this understanding completely changes how we view the relationship between humans and animals, because it ceases to be a one-way street where we give and they receive. It becomes an exchange, a shared journey where both sides have something valuable to offer. And when you understand this, when you truly internalize this message, you never look at an animal the same way again. You begin to respect their intelligence, their sensitivity, their capacity to make a difference in the world. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject because the behavior of those puppies reveals something about mindset and strategy that we rarely stop to think about. They didn't just sit around crying in a corner, waiting for someone to magically appear. They went after it. They sought attention. They created a scene. They used all the resources they had to ensure that someone would stop and look carefully. And this, in the end, is a powerful lesson on how to face critical situations in life. You can't just passively wait for things to resolve themselves. Sometimes you need to make noise. You need to be disruptive. You need to be impossible to ignore. The behind-the-scenes story reveals that the person who finally stopped and called for help did so precisely because they couldn't ignore the puppy's behavior. It wasn't the pity on the adult on the ground. It was the puppy's insistence. It was the way they ran, the way they barked, how they seemed to be saying with all their might, "Please, look, help us." And this person, who could have walked past like so many others, decided to trust the puppy's instincts. They decided to believe that there was something there that deserved attention. And that decision changed everything. This kind of transformation in how we act when faced with the unexpected is what separates stories with happy endings from avoidable tragedies. Because often what's lacking isn't the ability to help. What's lacking is the willingness to pay attention, to believe that you can make a difference, to not underestimate the importance of your action. The puppies knew this. They had no doubt that someone could help. The issue was getting that person to stop long enough to realize the urgency of the situation. And they succeeded. Against all odds, against the natural indifference of people in urban environments, against the rush and fear of getting involved, they succeeded. They provoked the intervention. They saved a life. And they showed everyone who was there and everyone who hears this story later that gratitude and recognition are not exclusively human feelings. They also know what it means to fight for those they love. Comment below, they are heroes, if you agree that these puppies deserve all the recognition in the world. And when you stop to think about what really happened there, an uncomfortable reflection begins to emerge. Because what those two puppies did wasn't just survival instinct, it was pure loyalty. It was a sense of protection so strong, so unwavering, that they were willing to face the unknown, to expose themselves to danger, to persist to exhaustion, just to ensure that adult had a chance. And then you ask yourself, how many humans would do the same? How many people, faced with a similar situation, would have the courage to stay there, not abandon, to fight to the end for someone in danger?
This hidden truth about the nature of animals is something we need to confront, because there's a stark contrast between the behavior of those puppies and the behavior of most people who passed by that street before they managed to attract attention. The little ones had nothing to gain. They were scared, vulnerable, probably hungry and cold. But even so, they didn't run away. They didn't hide. They didn't just think of themselves. They thought of the adult who was there, needing help. And this mentality of putting others first, even when you're also in a difficult situation, is something that should make us reflect deeply on who we really are. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this protective instinct that animals have isn't accidental. It's not something that appears out of nowhere. It's built through bonds, shared experiences, a kind of love that doesn't need words to be validated. Those puppies probably had a history with that adult. Maybe he took care of them. Maybe he was the only person who gave them food, affection, attention. And when that person fell, when they needed them, they didn't hesitate. They didn't make calculations. They didn't think about whether it was worth it. They just acted. Because that's what true love does. It moves you, even when you have every reason to give up. And the impact of this realization is transformative, because suddenly we realize that the values that society preaches so much, loyalty, courage, altruism, are being practiced more genuinely by animals than by many humans. And this is not an empty criticism, it's an invitation for us to rethink our own decisions. How many times have we turned our backs on someone who needed help because they were inconvenient, because they were a burden, because it wasn't our problem? The puppies didn't have that luxury. They couldn't simply move on, because for them, abandonment wasn't an option. Protection was the only possible answer. This journey of loyalty they undertook that day serves as a mirror for us, because it shows what truly matters when everything is at stake. It's not size that defines strength. It's not power that defines courage. It's the willingness to stay, to not give up, to do what needs to be done even when no one else is watching, even when no one else cares. And these two small, fragile, frightened puppies did exactly that. They stayed, they fought, they protected. And in the process, they proved that an animal's heart can be infinitely bigger than that of many people out there. The behind-the-scenes story reveals that the connection between that adult and the puppies was profound. It wasn't a casual relationship, it was a family. And families don't abandon. Families fight to the end. Families do the impossible to save those they love. And that, regardless of how many paws or hands you have, is what defines true loyalty. It's what separates those who only say they care from those who truly act when the situation gets tough. This emotional contrast between the coldness of those who walked right past and the devotion of those two little ones is one of the most powerful lessons this story offers, because it forces us to look inward and ask, which side would I be on? Would I be one of those who ignore, or would I be like the puppies who don't give up? And this is a question that doesn't have an easy answer, but it needs to be asked, because only through this deep reflection can we truly change. And it is precisely here that the story ceases to be just about puppies and becomes a mirror held up to us, because what happened on that street is not an isolated case. It is a reflection of how we live, of how we choose to see the world around us. And the hardest lesson, the most difficult to swallow, is this: sometimes those who don't speak our language can communicate more than we can, with all our words, technologies, and supposed social skills. Those puppies had no voice. They couldn't shout help or call an ambulance, but they communicated so clearly, so urgently that anyone who stopped to really look would understand the message. The problem is that we don't stop. We live in an autopilot mentality, where everything that doesn't fit into our routine becomes background noise. And then when a situation arises that demands attention, empathy, action, we ignore it. Not because we're bad people, but because we've developed a convenient selective blindness. We don't want to see suffering, because seeing it means having to do something about it. And doing something takes work. It takes us out of our comfort zone. It forces us to make decisions that may be inconvenient, that may delay our plans, that may put us in uncomfortable situations. This hidden truth about ourselves is unsettling, because when we honestly look at our own behavior, we realize that many times we choose indifference, not of malice, but out of fear. Fear of getting involved, fear of not knowing what to do, fear that the situation is worse than it seems and we won't be able to handle it. And this fear paralyzes us. It makes us invent justifications. Well, someone more prepared will help. This isn't none of my business. There must already be people taking care of this.
But the reality is that many times this someone doesn't exist. And while we wait for someone else to take the initiative, lives are lost, Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the impact of this awareness on who we truly are can be transformative. When you accept that you ignore obvious signs, not out of incapacity, but by choice, you gain the power to change. Because if it's a choice, you can choose differently. You can decide to stop. You can decide to look. You can decide that haste, fear, and indifference will no longer dictate how you act in the face of others' suffering. And this decision, however simple it may seem, is revolutionary because it changes not only the lives of those you help, but your own life as well. The behind-the-scenes story reveals that several people passed by that street before the incident occurred. Normal, busy people, probably good people in their daily lives, but at that specific moment, they chose not to see. They chose to believe it wasn't happening to them, and that doesn't make them monsters. It makes them human. It makes them the same as most of us who do this every day without even realizing it. The difference is that this time, two puppies didn't make that choice so easy. They challenged their conscience. They created a situation impossible to ignore. And in the process, they exposed a truth about society that we prefer not to face. This journey of self-discovery that the story provokes is uncomfortable but necessary. Because the moral authority we so desperately seek doesn't come from pretty speeches or inspiring social media posts. It comes from action. It comes from being present when things are difficult. It comes from not turning your back when everything inside you wants to escape. And the puppies, without knowing it, taught us this in the purest way possible. They didn't philosophize about loyalty, they practiced it. They didn't debate whether it was worthwhile, they simply did what needed to be done. And perhaps that's the greatest gift this story offers us, the chance to reevaluate our own choices, to look back and acknowledge the times we failed, and to look ahead and decide that next time we'll be different, that we'll be more like those little dogs, less caught up in justifications and more willing to act. Because in the end, what defines us isn't what we say or think, it's what we do when no one is watching. It's how we react when life puts someone vulnerable in our path. Comment below, I'm going to do things differently, if you're truly willing to change. And when we truly understand what was happening on that street, when we go beyond the surface and delve into the profound meaning of that moment, one thing becomes absolutely clear. Those puppies weren't asking for food. They weren't asking for affection. They weren't just seeking attention for themselves. They were asking for life. They were fighting for someone, anyone, to save that adult lying on the ground. And this distinction is fundamental because it completely changes how we interpret their behavior and consequently how we should interpret the signals that animals give us every day. The transformation this story provokes in those who truly absorb it is profound, because it forces you to question everything you thought you knew about intelligence, about communication, about what it truly means to be able to love and protect someone. The puppies didn't have diplomas, they weren't trained in first aid, they didn't have cell phones to call for rescue, but they had something much more powerful, the mindset of not giving up, the conviction that it was worth fighting for, and the courage to make noise until someone stopped to listen. And that, in the end, is what made all the difference between life and death that day.
Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the impact of this story shouldn't end here. It should spread. It should reach more people. Because somewhere, at this very moment, another animal is trying to communicate something urgent. It's trying to save someone. It's trying to say, there's danger, there's pain, there's a need. And the difference between this situation ending well or ending in tragedy could simply be a person who stopped to pay attention. A person who learned from this story that persistent barking isn't just noise, that strange behaviors aren't just eccentricities, that animals, when they act unusually, usually have a very good reason for it. The behind-the-scenes story of this revelation shows that the journey of those puppies didn't end when the ambulance arrived. They stayed there, watching until they were sure the adult was being cared for. Only then did they relax. Only then did they allow someone to care for them too. Because until that moment, their mission wasn't complete. Their protection wasn't guaranteed. And this level of dedication, focus, and unconditional love is something that should inspire us every day. not just in extreme situations, but in every small decision we make about how to treat the beings around us. This story carries with it a hidden truth about the world. We are surrounded by heroes who will never be recognized, animals that save lives, that protect, that love without asking for anything in return. And most of these stories are never told because people don't stop to notice, they don't stop to value them, they don't stop to share them. And that's why stories like this need to be spread. They need to reach more people. They need to change mindsets and provoke reflection, because each person who listens, who is moved, who learns, is one more person who can make a difference the next time they face a similar situation. Look, I know you've made it this far because something in this story touched you, because you're not indifferent, because you believe, just like me, that every living being deserves a chance. And that's precisely why I want to ask you a direct question, without beating around the bush. Would you have stopped? If you were walking down that street, seeing those puppies barking, running, returning to the body on the ground, would you have had the courage to approach, to investigate, to act? Leave your honest answer in the comments. It doesn't have to be a pretty answer. It has to be true. Because it's through this honesty that we grow, that we change, that we become better. And if you've made it this far, to this exact moment in the video, it's because something inside you resonated with this story. Because you're not one of those who gives up halfway through. You go all the way, and that says a lot about who you are. It says that you value real stories, stories that make you think, that transform you from the inside. And that's exactly the kind of content I bring here to the channel. Stories that go beyond the superficial, that touch you deeply, that make you look at the world in a different way. So if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button now, because here we don't just talk about cute animals. We talk about life, about transformation, about how small actions can change everything. And I want you to be here on this journey with me. Turn on notifications too, so you don't miss any new videos, because every week there's a new story, a new reflection, content that will make you feel and think. And look, if you really made it to the end, do this. Leave a comment saying, "I'm with you until the end." I read all the comments, and seeing that message shows me that the content really connected with you, that it wasn't just another video you watched halfway and forgot about. It was something that made an impression, that stayed with you. And that's what motivates me to keep bringing you stories like this.
And of course, if the video touched you in any way, leave a like. This simple gesture helps spread this message to more people who need to hear this, who need to learn to see the signs, who need to understand that making a difference doesn't require superpowers. It only requires us to stop, look, and act. Now, there's a video over here that perfectly complements this topic. It's about how animals perceive things we can't see and how this can save lives. Click and continue watching. I promise you won't regret it. See you in the next video.